My name is Esther, and I'm 64 years old. I've spent my entire life building a successful real estate business after becoming a widow at a young age. My son Maxwell was my pride and joy, and I helped him and his wife Catherine financially throughout their marriage. I even gave them a house to live in, rent-free. Catherine had always been subtly disrespectful, but I tolerated it for my son's sake. That is until the weekend party, where she publicly humiliated me by comparing me to her maid. That moment changed everything. If you've ever dealt with disrespectful family members, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button before I tell you what happened next. I was only 26 when my husband Thomas died unexpectedly from a heart attack. Maxwell was just 4 years old at the time. The grief was overwhelming, but I knew I had to be strong for my little boy. We had a modest savings account and the life insurance payout which I invested in a small fixer-upper property. That first property became the foundation of my real estate business. Those early years were incredibly difficult. I would work during the day showing properties and handling paperwork, then spend my evenings renovating that first property while my mother watched Maxwell. Many nights I fell asleep with paint in my hair and dust on my clothes, exhausted, but determined to create a stable future for my son. By the time Maxwell was in middle school, my business had grown substantially. I owned several residential properties and had begun investing in commercial real estate. I made sure that despite my busy schedule, I never missed a school event or sports game. Maxwell grew up knowing he was loved and supported, even without his father. I paid for the best education money could buy. When Maxwell expressed interest in becoming a lawyer, I encouraged him wholeheartedly. He attended an Ivy League university for his undergraduate degree, and then went to a prestigious law school. I was so proud when he graduated with honors and secured a position at a well-respected law firm in the city. It was during his final year of law school that Maxwell met Catherine. She was also studying law, ambitious and strikingly beautiful. When Maxwell brought her home for dinner the first time, I noticed how she surveyed my house with a calculating gaze, taking note of every valuable item. But I dismissed my concerns, telling myself I was being overprotective. Their relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, Maxwell proposed with a ring he had saved up for, though I offered to help. Catherine seemed disappointed with the modest diamond, and the next day Maxwell asked if I could contribute toward a larger stone. I agreed, wanting my son to be happy, though something about the request bothered me. The wedding planning revealed more warning signs. Catherine insisted on an extravagant ceremony at the most expensive venue in the city. The guest list ballooned to over 300 people, most of whom were Catherine's connections. The final bill came to over $100,000, which I paid entirely. Maxwell expressed his gratitude, but Catherine merely nodded as if it was expected. As my wedding gift to them, I offered one of my properties, a beautiful 4-bedroom house in an upscale neighborhood. The property was worth $1.2 million, but instead of selling it to them or transferring ownership, I allowed them to live there rent-free while I maintained ownership and paid the property taxes. At the time, I thought this arrangement would help them save for their future while providing security. Looking back, I realize this decision set the stage for years of entitlement. After the wedding, Catherine's attitude toward me changed dramatically. The polite mask she had worn during their courtship slipped away, revealing someone cold and increasingly entitled. She would cancel our lunch plans at the last minute, claiming work emergencies. When we did get together, she would spend most of the time on her phone or making condescending remarks about my clothes or hairstyle. Despite her behavior, I continued trying to build a relationship with her. I brought thoughtful gifts when visiting, offered to help with household projects, and always remembered special occasions. My efforts were met with indifference at best and mockery at worst. Still, I persisted, believing that family was worth the effort and not wanting to create tension between Maxwell and myself. As time went on, Catherine's behavior grew more openly disrespectful. She would make comments about my appearance that were thinly veiled insults. "Oh, Esther, that outfit is so practical. I guess at your age, comfort comes first," she would say with a smile that never reached her eyes. Or, "Your hair is looking interesting today. Have you considered trying a more modern style?" Each remark was carefully crafted to make me feel outdated and irrelevant while maintaining plausible deniability if I ever called her out. When I occasionally mentioned these comments to Maxwell, he would dismiss them. "Mom, that's just how Catherine talks. She doesn't mean anything by it. You're being too sensitive." The house I had given them to live in became another source of tension. Without consulting me, Catherine began making significant changes to the property. She removed the antique chandelier that had been in my family for generations, replacing it with a modern fixture that looked like it belonged in a hotel lobby. The warm, neutral paint colors were covered with stark whites and cold grays. Family photos of Maxwell as a child and pictures of his father were relegated to a guest bedroom deemed not aesthetic enough for the main living areas. When I gently reminded Catherine that major renovations should be discussed with me as the owner, she became defensive. "If we're going to live here, it needs to reflect our taste, not yours," she snapped. Maxwell, ever the peacemaker, suggested we all sit down to discuss future changes, but that conversation never happened. Family gatherings became exercises in exclusion. Catherine would seat me at the far end of the table away from Maxwell and the main conversation. She would forget to tell me about changed plans until the last minute or schedule events, knowing I had prior commitments. Once she planned a family dinner on my birthday, but made it all about announcing her promotion at work. Maxwell seemed blind to these dynamics. He had always been somewhat conflict avoidant, a trait that intensified around Catherine. He laughed uncomfortably at her cutting remarks, changed the subject when tensions rose, and later would assure me privately that everything is fine. I began to see how Catherine had manipulated him into always taking her side, using a combination of affection and cold withdrawal to train his responses. My best friend Judith saw through Catherine immediately. "That woman is a social climber who sees you as competition, not family," she told me after meeting Catherine at a dinner party. "She wants Maxwell's undivided attention and loyalty, and she sees your close relationship as a threat." Judith urged me to establish boundaries, but I worried about damaging my relationship with my son. "He's all I have, Judith. I can't risk losing him." I explained, though, in retrospect, I was already losing him to Catherine's influence. Despite living rent-free in a $1 million home, Catherine constantly complained about my interference. When I dropped by with homemade meals, she would remark that her diet didn't include heavy foods. When I offered to help with their garden, she claimed they were considering hiring a professional landscaper because they wanted something properly done. Catherine's materialistic nature became increasingly evident. She drove a luxury car that cost more than many people's annual salary. Her closet was filled with designer clothes, many still bearing tags. She belonged to an exclusive country club where she spent thousands each month entertaining friends, all while living rent-free in my house. I found myself in a constant internal battle. My instinct was to confront Catherine about her behavior, to demand the respect I deserved. But fear held me back. Fear of creating a permanent rift with Maxwell. Fear of confirming that my son had chosen someone who didn't value family or gratitude. So I continued to smile through the insults, to offer help, despite the rejection to show up, despite being made to feel unwelcome. I told myself I was being the bigger person, but in reality, I was enabling behavior that would only grow worse over time. Catherine had been planning this garden party for weeks, talking incessantly about the important people who would be attending. There were executives from Maxwell's law firm, partners from Catherine's firm, and various social connections she was eager to impress. She had hired caterers, a bartender, and even a string quartet to play soft background music. Although I hadn't been explicitly asked to help, I arrived at the house early that Saturday morning. Years of hosting events had taught me the myriad of last-minute details that can go wrong, and I thought an extra pair of hands might be appreciated. I wore comfortable jeans and a casual blouse, planning to change into a dress I'd brought along once the setup was complete. When Catherine saw me entering through the back gate, her smile faltered momentarily before she composed herself. "Esther, we weren't expecting you until 4, she said, her tone making it clear my early arrival was unwelcome. "I thought I could help with the preparations," I explained, noticing the caterers bustling around the patio. "There's always so much to do before guests arrive." Catherine's eyes flicked over my casual outfit with obvious disapproval. "Everything's under control. The professionals have it handled," she replied, emphasizing professionals as if to highlight that my assistance wasn't in the same category. Nevertheless, I found ways to make myself useful. I arranged the flower centerpieces more attractively, adjusted the placement of the outdoor furniture to create better conversation areas, and helped the catering staff locate items in the kitchen. Throughout these activities, Catherine watched with thinly veiled annoyance, occasionally making remarks like, "We actually wanted the chairs that way for a reason," or, "The caterers know what they're doing, Esther." By 3:30, most of the preparations were complete. I went to the guest bathroom to freshen up and change into my dress, a tasteful blue sheath that I'd purchased specifically for the occasion. When I emerged, Maxwell had arrived home from his morning golf game and greeted me with a warm hug. "Mom, you look nice," he said genuinely, though his attention was quickly diverted by Catherine calling him over to discuss some last-minute issue with the bartender. The first guests arrived promptly at 4, and the backyard soon filled with elegantly dressed people holding champagne flutes and engaging in animated conversation. Catherine floated among them like a queen at court, her designer dress catching the late afternoon sunlight. She was in her element, laughing at just the right moments, touching arms encouragingly and making introductions that highlighted connections and status. I knew few people at the gathering and found myself standing awkwardly alone near the hydrangea bushes I had planted years ago when the property was still truly mine. Occasionally, someone would make polite conversation before being drawn away to meet someone simply essential, according to Catherine. The pivotal moment came about an hour into the party. I was speaking with an elderly gentleman who turned out to be a senior partner at Maxwell's firm when Catherine approached with a group of impeccably dressed women. "And this garden is simply divine," one woman was saying. "Did you design it yourself?" "Of course," Catherine replied, though the garden had been my labor of love years before she ever set foot on the property. "I have quite the green thumb." The woman noticed me standing there and smiled politely. "And who is this?" Catherine's expression shifted subtly, a look I had seen many times. The slight tightening around her eyes, the barely perceptible curl of her lip. But what came next still shocked me to my core. "Oh," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "That's just Esther Maxwell's mother." Then with a laugh that seemed designed to carry across the gathering, she added, "Doesn't she look like she could be my maid in that outfit? I almost handed her a serving tray when she arrived." A horrified silence fell over the small group. The elderly partner cleared his throat uncomfortably. The women exchanged glances, clearly embarrassed by the rudeness they had just witnessed. And somewhere behind me, I heard Maxwell's awkward laugh. Not defending me, not calling out the inappropriate comment, just laughing, as if his wife had made a slightly risque joke rather than deeply insulted his mother. In that moment, something crystallized within me. The hurt was tremendous, a physical pain that radiated from my chest. I had given this woman a home, financially supported her lifestyle, tried to be a loving mother-in-law, despite years of subtle cruelty. And here she was, publicly reducing me to the status of a servant in my own property, while my son stood by and tacitly approved. I felt the eyes of the guests on me, some pitying, others simply uncomfortable. With a dignity I didn't know I possessed at that moment, I managed to smile calmly. "If you'll excuse me," I said quietly, my voice somehow steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm me. I walked slowly through the gathering head held high, nodding politely to those I passed. No one tried to stop me. Maxwell was now engaged in conversation with someone else, his back turned to the scene of his wife's cruelty. Catherine had already moved on to another group, laughing, as if nothing had happened. I collected my purse from the house and walked to my car. Only when I was safely inside with the doors locked did I allow the tears to come. I sat there for several minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Then, taking a deep breath, I started the engine and drove away from the house that was legally mine, but had never felt less like home. During that drive, as the familiar streets passed by in a blur, something shifted within me. The hurt began to transform into resolve. For years, I had allowed myself to be treated as less than had permitted Catherine's disrespect and Maxwell's enabling, because I feared losing my son. But in that moment of public humiliation, I realized I had already lost him. And perhaps more importantly, I had lost myself, the strong, independent woman who had built a business from nothing while raising a child alone. It was time to reclaim that woman. It was time to stand up for myself. And it was time for Catherine and Maxwell to experience the consequences of their actions. By the time I arrived home, my tears had dried and a sense of calm determination had settled over me. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table reflecting on years of abuse of disrespect and my own enabling behavior. For too long, I had allowed fear to guide my actions. Fear of conflict, fear of losing my son, fear of being alone. That fear had led me to accept treatment I would never have tolerated in any other relationship. The next morning, I called my attorney Richard, who had handled my real estate transactions for over 20 years. "I need to discuss the legal status of the Bradford Street property," I told him, "the one my son and daughter-in-law are living in." We met that afternoon in his office where he pulled the property file. "You've maintained full ownership," he confirmed after reviewing the documents. "They have no legal claim to the property. You've been paying the property taxes, and there's no formal lease agreement, just your verbal permission for them to reside there." "What are my options if I want to sell?" I asked. Richard explained that legally, I would need to provide them with formal notice to vacate typically 60 days in our state for non-lease occupants. "Since they're family, you might want to give them more time," he suggested gently. "60 days is sufficient," I replied, surprising myself with my firmness. Over the next week, I researched the current real estate market in their neighborhood. Property values had increased significantly since I had purchased the house 15 years ago. Similar homes were selling for nearly $2 million, a substantial profit on my original investment. I also spent time reflecting on how my generosity had enabled Catherine's sense of entitlement. By providing them with a free place to live, I had removed the natural consequence of their spending habits. Catherine bought designer clothes and took luxury vacations while I paid the property taxes on their home. Maxwell, who had once been thoughtful about money, had adopted his wife's materialistic values. Perhaps my well-intentioned help had actually harmed them by preventing them from developing financial responsibility. This realization connected me back to the strength I had found when building my business. After Thomas died, I could have sought the easy path, selling our home and moving in with my parents, perhaps. Instead, I had chosen independence and hard work, which ultimately led to success and self-respect. I had raised Maxwell to value those things too, but somewhere along the way, particularly after Catherine entered the picture, those values had been forgotten. With renewed clarity, I developed a plan to sell the house. I would be fair, but firm. I would not act out of vindictiveness, though the temptation was certainly there after the garden party humiliation. Instead, I would simply exercise my right as a property owner while ensuring Maxwell and Catherine had reasonable time to find new accommodations. I contacted Elizabeth, a realtor I had worked with on many transactions, and explained the situation without going into the personal details. The current occupants will need 60 days to relocate, I told her. Can we work with that timeline? Elizabeth assured me it wouldn't be a problem and suggested we begin with professional photographs and a virtual tour that could be arranged while giving Maxwell and Catherine advance notice. She also recommended setting the asking price at $2.1 million, slightly above market value, due to the property's desirable location and excellent condition. Within days, Elizabeth had found a potential buyer, a surgeon relocating to the area who was willing to work with our timeline and had offered the full asking price without haggling. The pieces were falling into place faster than I had anticipated, bringing both satisfaction and anxiety. Despite Catherine's cruelty and Maxwell's failure to defend me, they were still family. I experienced moments of doubt, wondering if I was overreacting to one public insult. Then I would remember the years of subtle digs, the dismissive treatment, the taking without gratitude. I would recall standing alone at that party while Catherine mockingly compared me to a servant in a house that I owned, and my resolve would strengthen once again. With the buyer's offer accepted and the paperwork in process, I sat down to write a formal letter to Maxwell and Catherine. I kept it businesslike and direct. As the legal owner of the property at 247 Bradford Street, I am writing to inform you that the house has been sold. In accordance with state law, you are hereby given 60 days' notice to vacate the premises. If you require assistance with finding new accommodations, I can provide recommendations for rental properties in the area. I ended with a simple, sincerely Esther Coleman, foregoing the mom or mother-in-law that might have softened the message. This wasn't about family ties now. It was a business transaction between a property owner and occupants who had worn out their welcome. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness for what this would do to my relationship with my son, anxiety about the confrontation that would inevitably follow, but also a profound sense of liberation. For the first time in years, I was standing up for myself, setting boundaries, and refusing to be treated as less than I deserved. Catherine and Maxwell received my letter on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing non-stop. I let the first several calls go to voicemail, needing time to prepare myself for the confrontation. Maxwell's messages escalated from confused to angry. "Mom, there must be some mistake with this letter. Call me back immediately." "Are you serious about this? We need to talk right now. I can't believe you would do this to us. This is our home." Finally, I answered Catherine's call, deciding it was better to face her directly rather than let Maxwell serve as intermediary. "How dare you?" she hissed the moment I picked up. "After everything we've done for you." The irony of her statement was so profound I almost laughed. "Everything you've done for me, I believe you have that backwards, Catherine. We've included you in our lives, invited you to our events." She continued, as if allowing me into a home that I legally owned was some great favor. "Like the garden party where you compared me to your maid?" I asked calmly. There was a brief silence. "That was a joke, Esther. Don't be so sensitive." It wasn't funny, and it was merely the culmination of years of disrespect. "So this is revenge?" she asked. "You're throwing us out of our home because your feelings got hurt." "This is not revenge, Catherine. This is a business decision about a property I own, and it's not your home. It's my investment that I allowed you to live in rent-free for years. That arrangement is now ending." Catherine's tone suddenly changed, becoming wheedling. "We can work this out. I'll apologize if that's what you want. We can have dinner, talk things through." "The house has already been sold," I informed her. "The new owners take possession in 60 days. The manipulation dropped instantly, replaced by fury. "You'll regret this. Maxwell will never forgive you." After hanging up, I had about 30 minutes of peace before Maxwell called. His approach was different, less attacking, more hurt and betrayed. "Mom, how could you do this without even talking to us first?" he asked, his voice breaking. "We built a life in this house. We have nowhere to go." "You and Catherine make excellent salaries," I reminded him gently. "You've had years to save money by not paying rent or a mortgage. Finding a new place to live should be well within your means." "That's not the point," he exclaimed. "This was our home. You've pulled the rug out from under us with no warning." I took a deep breath. "Maxwell, for years I've watched Catherine treat me with disrespect while you said nothing. I've been insulted, mocked, and taken for granted. At the garden party, she publicly humiliated me and you laughed." "She didn't mean anything by it, Mom. That's just Catherine's sense of humor." His defense of her cut deep. "No, son. That's not humor. It's cruelty. And your failure to recognize that tells me how much she's changed you." The conversation ended with Maxwell declaring that I had chosen money over family and suggesting I was having some kind of breakdown. "Dad would be ashamed of you," were his final words before hanging up. That hurt more than anything Catherine had ever said to me. Thomas had been a kind, fair man who valued self-respect. I believed he would have understood exactly why I had taken this stand, but Maxwell's invocation of his father cut deep nonetheless. In the days that followed, family members and friends began taking sides. My sister called to ask what had happened, having heard Maxwell's version, that I had suddenly turned against them. Maxwell's godfather, an old friend of Thomas's, reached out with concern that I was acting out of character. It seemed my son and his wife were crafting a narrative that I was unstable or vindictive, rather than acknowledging their role in the situation. Some family members supported me, however. My brother Michael, who had witnessed Catherine's behavior firsthand at holiday gatherings, told me he was proud of me for finally standing up for myself. "It's about damn time, Esther," he said. "That woman has been walking all over you for years." Catherine's next move was to threaten legal action. She consulted an attorney who apparently informed her that she might have a claim based on verbal promises and long-term residency. I received a threatening letter that Richard quickly dismissed as baseless. "They have no case," he assured me. "All documentation clearly shows you as the sole owner, and there's no evidence of any promise to transfer ownership." Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with Maxwell and Catherine, responding only to practical questions about the moving timeline through email. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, harder even than building my business as a young widow. The strain of potentially losing my relationship with my only child weighed heavily on me, but I remained resolute. This was about more than a house. It was about respect boundaries and refusing to be treated as a doormat any longer. The sale closed without complications. The new owners, Dr. James Willis and his wife Sophia, were understanding about the situation and agreed to honor the 60-day vacancy period. I found them to be kind, appreciative people who valued the property and planned to raise their children there. Everything I had hoped for when I first allowed Maxwell and Catherine to live in the house. I decided to use a portion of the sale proceeds to establish a scholarship fund at Maxwell's old university for students who had lost a parent. It felt like a way to honor Thomas's memory while creating something positive from this difficult situation. The rest, I invested securing my own financial future and reminding myself that self-care wasn't selfish. As the moving day approached, Catherine and Maxwell reluctantly relocated to a luxury apartment downtown. It was beautiful but much smaller than the house, and Catherine was forced to store many of her designer purchases due to limited closet space. The monthly rent consumed a significant portion of their income, a reality check they had avoided for years, thanks to my generosity. Catherine's social circle quickly learned of their downsized living situation. Her Instagram posts, once filled with images of the spacious backyard and elegant dining room where she hosted gatherings, were replaced with carefully cropped photos that hid the apartment's more modest dimensions. Several of her friends asked pointed questions at a dinner party they attended, wondering aloud why they would give up such a beautiful home. My mother-in-law had some financial difficulties and needed to sell. Catherine lied smoothly, unaware that one of the guests was connected to Dr. Willis and knew the truth. Word spread quickly through their social circle about the actual circumstances, causing Catherine significant embarrassment. Maxwell, meanwhile, began to see his wife in a new light. Without the buffer of free housing, their financial discussions became more frequent and tense. Catherine's spending habits, once an amusing quirk when they had no housing costs, now caused serious strain on their budget. He discovered credit card debt she had hidden from him and realized they had almost no savings despite years of dual professional incomes. How could we make this much money and have nothing to show for it? I overheard him asking her during a tense phone call I accidentally answered and then couldn't help listening to for a moment before making my presence known. The restricted living space also created new tensions. Catherine complained constantly about the noise from neighbors, the lack of storage, and the indignity of shared laundry facilities. Maxwell found himself wondering if these complaints had always been so frequent, or if he had simply tuned them out before. My relationship with extended family members evolved as well. Those who had initially sided with Maxwell and Catherine began to reconsider as the full story emerged. My niece Amelia, who had always been close to Maxwell, called me after having dinner with the couple in their new apartment. "Aunt Esther, I owe you an apology," she said. "I should have known there was more to the story. Catherine spent the entire evening making snippy comments about you and acting like she was some kind of victim. It was really eye-opening." For my part, I focused on rebuilding my life post-confrontation. I joined a book club I had always been too busy for, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again, something I hadn't done since a brief relationship 10 years after Thomas died. I found joy in simple pleasures that had nothing to do with family drama or real estate. I also established firm boundaries. When Catherine called asking to borrow money for a lease deposit on a larger apartment, I politely declined. When Maxwell's birthday approached, I sent a card and gift, but declined the invitation to a dinner I knew would be uncomfortable for everyone. I was learning that maintaining boundaries didn't mean cutting people off completely. It meant engaging on my terms in ways that preserved my dignity and peace of mind. Catherine made several attempts to reconcile, but only when she wanted something. She would call with syrupy sweetness asking about my health and activities before inevitably steering the conversation toward some financial need or favor. I remained polite but firm, unwilling to be manipulated any longer. About 4 months after they moved, Maxwell reached out independently. He asked if we could meet for coffee without Catherine. I agreed, though I kept my expectations modest. When we met at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes, I was struck by how tired he looked. The confident, carefree son I remembered had been replaced by someone with worry lines and slumped shoulders. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began awkwardly. "I wasn't fair to you. I should have stood up when Catherine said that thing at the party." It wasn't a full acknowledgement of years of enabling bad behavior, but it was a start. "Thank you for saying that, Maxwell. It means a lot to me." He stirred his coffee nervously. "Things have been difficult lately. Not just the move. Catherine and we're having problems." I listened as he shared some of the challenges they were facing: financial strain, trust issues, fundamental differences in values that had been obscured when times were easier. I offered sympathy without advice, allowing him to reach his own conclusions about his marriage. "I miss you, Mom," he said finally. "I miss how things used to be between us." I miss that too, I admitted. But I don't miss being disrespected or taken for granted. He nodded, understanding, crossing his features. I get that now. I really do. We parted with a tentative plan to meet again the following week. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a beginning. The first family gathering after the house sale was my brother Michael's 60th birthday party. Maxwell attended without Catherine, who had a previous engagement, according to him. The atmosphere was awkward initially, with family members uncertain how to navigate our changed relationship. But as the evening progressed, some of the old ease returned. Maxwell shared stories from his childhood that made everyone laugh, and for brief moments, it felt like we might find our way back to something resembling family. As I watched my son across the room engaged in animated conversation with his cousins, I felt both sadness and hope. Our relationship had been damaged, perhaps irrevocably changed, but not destroyed. And perhaps the new foundation we were building, based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation, would ultimately be stronger than what came before. In the year following the house sale, I discovered a surprising sense of freedom. Without the constant anxiety of navigating Catherine's moods and Maxwell's divided loyalties, I found space to rediscover myself. I traveled to places I'd always wanted to see: a walking tour through the villages of Tuscany, a photography workshop in the Southwest, a literary festival in Edinburgh. These experiences nourished parts of me that had been neglected during the years I focused primarily on family and business. I also reconnected with old friends like Judith, who had tried to warn me about Catherine years before. "You look younger," she remarked during a weekend spa getaway. "There's a lightness to you now." She was right. Though the situation with Maxwell and Catherine remained complicated, the burden of walking on eggshells and accepting disrespect had been lifted. I no longer dreaded family gatherings or checked my phone with anxiety. I had set boundaries, and despite the initial pain, was healthier for having done so. Maxwell continued our coffee meetings, which gradually evolved into dinners and occasional weekend activities. Our conversations became more honest, touching on subjects we had avoided for years. He admitted that Catherine had isolated him from friends and family members who questioned her behavior, creating an environment where her perspective was the only one that mattered. "I lost myself," he confessed during a long walk through the botanical gardens. "I became so focused on keeping her happy that I stopped thinking about what was right." Catherine, meanwhile, struggled with the consequences of her actions. The social status she had cultivated was diminished without the impressive house as a backdrop for her entertaining. Several friends drifted away when she could no longer host lavish parties or accompany them on expensive shopping trips. Her law firm passed her over for partnership, citing concerns about her judgment and interpersonal skills after hearing rumors about how she had treated family members. 6 months after the move, Catherine reached out and asked to meet with me privately. Curious about her motives, but wary of manipulation, I suggested a public place, a cafe in a neutral neighborhood. When she arrived, I was struck by how different she looked. The designer clothes and perfect makeup remained, but there was a vulnerability in her expression I hadn't seen before. "Thank you for meeting me, Esther." She began, her usual confidence noticeably absent. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about how things unfolded between us." I nodded, but remained silent, waiting. "What I said at the party was unforgivable," she continued, "and it wasn't just that day. I've been disrespectful to you for years." Her acknowledgement surprised me. I had expected excuses or subtle blame shifting, not a direct admission of fault. "May I ask why?" I inquired, keeping my tone neutral. Catherine stared into her untouched coffee. "I was jealous," she admitted quietly. "Maxwell adored you. He talked about you constantly when we first met. How strong you were, how you built your business while raising him alone. I felt like I could never measure up to this amazing woman he described." So you tried to diminish me instead, I concluded. She nodded, shame evident in her expression. It was easier than trying to earn your respect, which I assumed I could never do. And then it became a habit. Putting you down made me feel more secure somehow. We talked for nearly 2 hours that afternoon, having the honest conversation we should have had years earlier. Catherine revealed insecurities stemming from her own family dynamics. A critical mother who was never satisfied, a father who valued appearance over substance. None of it excused her behavior, but it helped me understand it. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said, as we prepared to leave. "I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did, and I'm truly sorry for it." In the months that followed, I made a conscious decision about how to move forward with Maxwell and Catherine. Rather than continuing to provide financial support, I offered something more valuable: guidance. When they mentioned struggling with a budget, I shared resources and strategies that had helped me manage my business finances. When they considered moving to a more affordable area, I connected them with a reliable realtor who specialized in finding value properties rather than luxury showpieces. This approach required Maxwell and Catherine to take responsibility for their choices, while still offering them a pathway to rebuild. It was a delicate balance, supporting without enabling caring, without compromising my own boundaries. Slowly, our family relationships began healing on new terms. Holiday gatherings resumed, though, with adjusted expectations and clearer boundaries. Catherine made visible efforts to treat me with respect, thanking me specifically for contributions and seeking my input on matters where my experience might be valuable. Maxwell became more attentive to the dynamics between us, stepping in if conversations became tense rather than looking away. The process wasn't linear. There were setbacks and difficult moments. Old patterns occasionally re-emerged, requiring gentle but firm correction. Trust once broken could only be rebuilt gradually through consistent actions rather than promises or apologies. Through this challenging journey, I experienced profound personal growth. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. I discovered that standing up for myself didn't mean losing family. It meant creating the possibility for more authentic connections based on mutual respect rather than obligation or fear. Most importantly, I recognized that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their actions. By selling the house, I had forced Maxwell and Catherine to face reality, both financial and relational. That confrontation with reality, though painful, created an opportunity for genuine change that might never have occurred otherwise. As I reflect on this journey from doormat to dignified, I realize that self-respect isn't just something we claim. It's something we practice daily through the boundaries we set and the treatment we accept. It took me 64 years to fully embrace this truth. But as the saying goes, better late than never. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that risked a relationship but was necessary for your self-respect? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, respecting yourself is the foundation for all other healthy relationships in your life.